fooled ourselves into thinking that we're the ones with the ownership over the technology, when in reality it's kind of gotten the best of us at some point. That we feel a slave to technology. That, you know, these days people talk about doing their social media. Right? It's like you got to go do your ironing. Oh my God, I'm gonna block out like an hour just to like update all my stuff. Right? I mean, that's how sometimes it feels like an obligation that you have to do this thing. And so I think the purpose, at least what I hope that all of you get out of this week, is to step back for a second and think, all right, why am I using all of these things? You know, what am I getting at? And especially when you think about it in a professional sense. You know, Jeffrey pointed out the example of the 2 monitors in the workplace. And, you know, it's something that a lot of companies grapple with. You know, how do you monitor that stuff? How do you force employees to stick to work? How do you measure whether they're actually doing something beneficial? You know, maybe they're reaching customers, maybe they're coming up with ideas, they're tweeting about a particular product that their company's working on. That's not always a bad thing. But the point is to get that awareness and think about why you're doing it. But I started at CNN, moved on to CBS full-time, and then since then have been contributing as a freelancer to a number of different outlets. Mainly covering technology, so I've been science and technology for the better part of about 13, 14 years. So if you think back to what was happening with technology back then, like email was a big thing, right? The web. Who knows, remembers Lycos, web crawler, Netscape, dial-up, you know? All these things that are just antiquated now by today's standards. And the big difference with what was happening back then was that your technology experience was by and large something, it was finite, it was on, off. You know, you went online and then you went offline. And nobody had a smartphone. I mean, back when I first started covering technology, most people didn't even have a cell phone, right? So getting your email was just a very compartmentalized sort of thing. You left it, you came back to it. Increasingly, you had the opportunity to have access to it any time. You had wireless, you had smartphones, now we're all connected to it. So rethink. That, for me, was about trying to create this perspective. Kind of having your sharp moment. And in the book, I retell that story and, you know, illuminate some statistics, some things that maybe people hadn't thought about before, and just try to get people to step back for a second. Give you, again, permission to think about this stuff. And then the next stage is reboot. So, not unlike you would reboot your computer, which no one ever turns their computer off anymore anyway these days, but if you were to reboot your computer, you know, it's kind of flushing the system, right? So, much like you're doing this week, it's about a little bit of a detox. And I can feel your pain of this week because I decided in January of 2010 to drop out of social networks for 8 months and just stop. And I told people about this experiment. I thought, maybe this will get some attention because I'm the tech guy. I'm supposed to be on these all the time, and I was. I thought if I tell people I'm going to sort of push back and be a little bit Malcolm Gladwell about it and kind of go the other direction, maybe people will take notice. And they did, but the way, so I let people know on Facebook that I was going to be leaving, and they just reacted in this way that was so funny because I got so many messages saying, oh no, you're going away. Don't leave us. How will we ever see you and hear about you again? Oh, you're going away. It's like I was dying, right? It was like, that was the way that it felt. That people were like mourning my loss. And I thought, what? I mean, it's really just a bunch of ones and zeros, right? It's not really me. I always think of social networks sometimes as like Pleasantville, right? Because you go there, and there's so many happy status updates, life is great, pictures from vacation, everyone feels good. Yeah, who doesn't want to live there, right? It's such a happy place. And people tend to sort of project, you know, this image of themselves, right? So I was just as guilty of that. And I realized that I was creating this Daniel Sieberg that was not the real Daniel Sieberg. Anybody who knew me through these social networks thought, man, your life is awesome. You're like traveling around all over the place. You know, you're doing all this work. You're on TV. You're, oh man, wow. Right? They never got a sense of the problems that I had. They never got a sense of the things that were going on behind the scenes. And at some point, I started to live too much Daniel Sieberg virtual guy and not enough Daniel Sieberg real guy. I thought, hey, oh, look, I'm tweeting, I'm on Facebook, I'm communicating with people, you know, through work. I was constantly, like, online, emailing, lazy, boop, 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 boop. Man, I was like, man, I'm the future. And yet all of the sort of nuances of relationships got lost. And when I went home for the holidays back at the end of 2009, right before I started this experience, I realized that I lost track of a lot of the things that were going on in people's lives. People who were on my social networks, like, how did I miss all this stuff? You know, big seminal events, getting married, you know, pregnancy, stuff like that. And the reality is that I have become what I say is a terrific broadcaster and a terrible communicator. And so I think that in some cases that's what this is doing to us. That it's all this kind of one-way, overwhelmed by all this stuff, right? I mean, how many of you log on to Twitter and just kind of log out 5 minutes later because you can't, there's just so many, God, what is that, right? I mean, to get to the things that you really want to get to, you kind of end up having to spend time and energy and sifting through all this stuff, right? So that's not to say, and I want to establish at this point that this is by no means an anti-technology book. I love technology. But I think that we're starting to lose the healthy relationship with it. And just like food, you know, the book is called The Digital Diet. You know, you've got to have that healthy relationship with it. So, can the 10% raise their hand? Reconnect is about connecting with those people around you who matter. You know, one of the things that technology enables us to do in a wonderful way is to connect with people well outside of where we live, obviously. You can connect with people anywhere in the world, anytime you want. So I think that there's a tendency, though, to increasingly connect with people way outside your sphere, okay? So there are people around you, your friends, your family, who might be kind of in this sort of immediate, if you think of concentric circles going outwards, the people who are your immediate friends and family are kind of here. And unfortunately, I think all too often, technology allows us to kind of step like way over them. So it's like you're just kind of walking, you're just like not even seeing them. Like they're like right in front of you. They're like, hey, hi, I'm your family. You're like, yep, I'm communicating with people over here now. And you're just kind of like always extending yourself beyond the people who are right in front of you. And so the idea of reconnect is to think about when do you use certain technologies with certain friends, with certain family, what works best. You know, you're always texting that friend but never calling them. You know, are you constantly Facebooking with somebody, you know, but it never goes below the surface. You know, the messages are just kind of like, hey, how's it going? Cool, yeah, right? So what is the dynamic of the relationship and what is the technology doing to it? And then revitalize goes back to the idea of using technology to our advantage and feeling like we have control over it, not the other way around, feeling empowered by it, you know? The last thing I want is for people to read the book and come away and feel like, I didn't really feel better about my technology, or to leave this week and think, it doesn't matter. You know, the idea is to come back to it and feel healthy and say, you know, just like a detox, you know, a juice diet, and you take some time off eating, you know, junk food, and your body feels better, right? You come back and you're like, okay, great, it's good, clear. Same idea with Revitalize. It's about, you know, embracing technologies for the right reasons, thinking about when, and why, and how, and which ones are best for me. But I think that we've reached this tipping point with our technologies and our relationship with it. And there's no going back. And I think that Jeffrey talked about this in the beginning, just not wanting to lose your humanity along the way. You know, there's a movie with Bruce Willis called Surrogates that came out several years ago, where people are in pods, and their projection of themselves is out in the real world interacting. The actual person is just safely tucked in this pod, right? Suggesting that we're going that direction, but I think that there are elements of that that serve as a cautionary tale, and you know, I just want people to have that feeling that they are the ones in control, that you can put things away when you need to. And then you go back, at the end of this week, you go back to social networks, and you think, all right, what am I going to tweet about? When am I going to do my status update? And what matters? And, that person who's my friend on Facebook, how much of a friend are they? And, when should I be picking up the phone? When can I go out for coffee and see people? So I'll give you a few little tips from the book because I feel like they're beneficial in social settings. But one of the ones that I throw out there is no tech turds. So that is when you take out your smartphone at a restaurant and just dump it on the table. Just dump it there, like a big steaming tech turd. There it is. You know what that is? You know what you're doing? You're basically saying, I have invited someone else to this meal. And their only role is to interrupt us. That's it. They're going to vibrate, flash. It takes away from the experience that you have with people there. Now, again, it's not always possible keep your phone away. Sometimes you have business to do. Today we were having lunch, I had to pull out my phone. I had to do something. And I tried to explain to my mom and my stepdad, I'm sorry, I've got some emails I've got to respond to. So you acknowledge the people you're with. Why you're doing it. Not just a mindless blah, 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 right? If you're waiting for an important phone call from your wife, she's on her way to she's going to go to the hospital, she's pregnant. You got to have a phone out. Listen. So, these are reasons that you can talk about with the people you're with. You humanize that experience. You make the people with you feel important, more important than whatever comes into your device. My wife had a nickname for me for the longest time. It was Glowworm. Okay? Because every night, Daniel's face is illuminated by some sort of a device. And it's there first thing in the morning. So when you roll out of bed, yes, I know it makes a great alarm clock. However, there are cheap alarm clocks. Cost $15, battery operated, will last for 5 years. You just leave it there and not think about it. And you separate the technology from that part of your life. So you get up, you get some coffee, you think about things a little bit. Rather than diving right in. In the book I talk about your E-day. Like, when do you start your E-day? When are you off? Because you can be off. You can start your E-day whenever. When you first wake up, when you first get coffee, when you first get to school. Like, when does it start, right? So just being consciously aware of that. And if it has to be early, fine. But think, all right, now I've started my E-day. I've sent out that first email. There's a chance that someone's going to send something back to me, and now I'm in it. Now I'm in it. I'm in it, right? Same thing at the end of the day. Now, when you finish whatever you need to do, and it's 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, you think, you know what? I'm just going to watch TV. And put everything away, and everybody will survive.